Alright, I'm gonna try and make a Kalista matchup tier list. This will probably be a very long video, so I'll include timestamps if I remember to. But I'll give the TLDR for the matchup because some of you, well, you probably have busy lives, you don't want to watch everything that I'm going to say. So the TLDR is that Kalista is very bad against front-loaded damage, essentially champions who can unload all of their damage in a very short period of time. Think like assassin hybrid sort of ADCs. So someone like Aphelios can use his ultimate and Q and hit everything very quickly. Like that would screw up Kalista very easily. While someone like a Kog'maw, he can't really use all of his abilities at once and do a lot of damage. His W is a longer ability, so fast damage output in a short time frame is bad for Kalista. And Kalista is definitely an early game champion, and you don't want the enemy scaling into late game. Kalista may be one of the worst early game ADCs here, but it's definitely still better than a lot of other champions because she is an ADC. She still does ADC things. Consistent auto attack damage is always better than ability based damage, which have cooldowns and stuff. But yeah, essentially, any champion that does a lot of damage in a short time frame and can win lane against Kalista early game is a bad matchup for Kalista. That's the TLDR of it. But now I can go into more detail. Starting with, we'll go alphabetically. Aphelios. Oh, by the way, I should probably say, I've included every champion who is considered an ADC and champions who I've seen played bot lane. There are some ADCs here who aren't ADCs like Seraphine and Veigar and Karthus, but they're played bot lane very often. I've seen them personally. There are some ADCs that I'd sometimes play, but they're not listed here. For example, Cassiopeia isn't on here because I personally have not faced a Cassiopeia ADC. I have played it a couple of times myself, but that's not enough to give an opinion on how the matchup is for Kalista. Like all of these I've played against as Kalista at some point, and I can give a good idea of how each matchup feels. So now, starting with Aphelios. Aphelios is definitely weak in the early game, so you can overpower him very easily. But he can use all of his abilities and do a lot of damage very quickly, especially depending on which weapons he has. So if he has, for example, Calibrum, I'll just go by colors. If he has green or blue or purple, then in short fights, it's kind of difficult to do anything because he's just going to lose all of his abilities at once and he'll do a lot of damage together. If he's using red or white, then his fights are going to last a little bit longer. And while people will say, well, red-white, you should avoid fighting Aphelios in that case, for you, that's not always the case, because that's one of the times you have a damage window to kill him without him using everything on you before you can get in range of him, because remember, Aphelios has a lot more range than you. His abilities and ult are much more longer range than your attack range. But because he's still a very late game ADC, he can beat him in the early game. I would say this is a skill matchup. Just because if you can beat him in the early game and keep him weak, then he's pretty easy. But if you don't lane aggressively against him, then it can be a little bit difficult to win the game. But do remember that it's the support determines the lane more than the ADC. But the support one would be a lot harder to do just because there's so many champions who can play support. I'll try that maybe later, but I'll keep it to ADC for now. So Aphelios, strong front-loaded damage, weak in the early game. You can punish him in the early game. You can make his life hell, but as long as you can finish the game fast enough, he can't do anything to you. And he's completely immobile, so your ultimate is kind of a big threat. There's no Gale Force anymore. Ashe. So a lot of people would put her like this. Like Ashe is slows, Ashe has more range, Ashe just wins. I would say she's a bit more on the enemy favorite side, just because early game that slow isn't that impactful because it doesn't slow you enough to lower your DPS while kiting in the early game, and the best way to deal with an Ashe is to make sure that your lethal tempo, her lethal tempo, doesn't fully activate. Because the moment it does, the moment she gets 50 extra attack range, especially if she has approach velocity, it's very difficult to get away from her. And if she just extends the trade without you being able to trade back because of the attack range difference, it's very hard to come out of that after. So if you're going to fight against Ashe, go for short trades constantly, because her W cooldown is very long, especially in the early game. You can totally hide behind the minion after W goes out and then just walk up to her. And every time she goes for an auto attack on you, you usually have the time to go for an auto attack on them. If they try to extend the trade, you keep walking into them. But just keep it short enough that her Q and lethal tempo don't fully proc. Late game, you should always stay cleanse. You always cleanse Ashe ult. She's immobile, so your ultimate's very good against her. But that's pretty much it. Her damage isn't that high, so you can kill her pretty easily in the late game. So she isn't that difficult to deal with in the late game as a team. But for you, in a 1v1 case, yeah, she's going to beat you. She's going to space you out. You're not going to be able to do much. So it's somewhere between skill matchup and enemy favorite, but I'm going to put enemy favorite just because you do need some experience to know when Ashe can't just run you down and when you can run her down. Caitlyn. This is more on the enemy favorite side as well, because she excels in the early game with her range, and she's one of the few longer range ADCs who actually have a dash. So like Aphelios doesn't have a dash, Ashe doesn't have a dash, Kog'maw doesn't, Jinx doesn't. Caitlyn's one of the few ADCs who do, and that kind of sucks, so you can't quite punish her if she tries walking up too far. But her dash cooldown is very long. You can try and make use of that. And so basically against Caitlyn, remember, most of her abilities are all of her abilities are skill shots except her ultimate. So focus on dodging those. Her Q gets really big after the first thing it hits, so that's a bit harder to dodge, but you can totally dodge it. Just keep an eye out. It's a bit hard to trade against her, but remember, most Caitlyn lanes shove the wave very easily, and they're usually played with a longer range support as well, who also prefers to shove the wave. So if you can get your jungler to come around quite often, it's going to be very easy to deal with Caitlyn, because Caitlyn's mid game is really bad. She doesn't... That's like the awkward moment before she damage spikes. So you can take big advantage of her with your ultimate, with her high aggressiveness or mobility, because if she misses her E-slow, you can catch up to her in the mid game. In the early game, even if she misses her E-slow, that distance she creates is enough to get away. So mid game, you can fight her really aggressively. Early game, hope your jungler comes around. But overall, Caitlyn's a little bit difficult. So against longer range ADCs, it's a little bit difficult, but that also depends on the ADC. Like Kog'Maw, I'd say, is really easy, but we'll get to that later. Draven, this is completely unplayable. Draven has very strong dueling potential, very strong early game. He gets to full build very quickly, so you cannot deal with him early game or mid game. The only way you can deal with him is to shut him down in the first 5 minutes of lane. And that isn't always easy, because both junglers and laners should know that they need to focus the Draven lane early game. Because if they do, and he gets snowballing, it's very difficult to stop him. And he's going to be played very often with a very aggressive support who's going to try to cheese you level 1, level 2, flash you, whatever. So the best way to deal with Draven is to not give him the opportunity to start snowballing. Play as passive as you have to. Give up entire waves. Stay under your turret. I don't care what you have to do. Make sure he doesn't get to cash out. Because as long as you can prevent that, as long as you can kill him before he can cash out, he is useless. But if he does anything, you're kind of screwed. So that's why the lane itself is unplayable, but winning games against Draven isn't that bad, because it's a really simple game plan. You just need to make sure he doesn't get to cash out, but you can't control what your teammates do. If they give him a kill and he gets like 700 gold, you're kind of screwed. Ezreal, this is definitely an easy matchup. I'm gonna actually make another tier list, because otherwise I'm gonna forget which ones I have ranked and which ones I have not. So Ezreal is a very easy matchup, because he is a very skill shot. All of his abilities are skill shots. Because of that, you can easily take advantage of him. You can just kite all of his abilities, especially before he completes Mana Immune. More mana, I should say. Especially before that, you can easily duel him, because even if he has full stacks of passive, if he doesn't hit his Qs, you just win the auto attack battle. Even if you're down like 500 golds worth of item, you can probably kill him. He's only difficult to deal with once he builds a Frozen Heart. So, but you should never reach that point. And late game, he's not a big deal. His DPS isn't that high. He has a really quick burst combo that you can use to kill people, but he's not a big threat late game. He is very highly mobile, but he's kind of an insect in that case, where like he doesn't do much except, you know, farm safely, let the support roam. So usually if you're facing against an Ezreal as Kalista, you have to be very aggressive, tower dive him as much as possible, make him miss out on as many minions as you can, walk past the tower, literally like zone him out completely. If you can force the entire enemy team to go on you just to let Ezreal farm, then that's worth it, because now they can take Rift Herald, they can take Void Grubs, and Ezreal should not have that much attention put on him. So you can beat him early game, you can beat him mid game. Late game you can also kind of beat him if he doesn't build a Frozen Heart. And yeah, overall it's very easy. Jhin, as of right now, because of the lethality build, Jin's a little bit difficult because he can reach the point where he can almost one-shot you very quickly. But overall, this is definitely one of his easiest matchups. I'd say it's something between close to favorite and easy. Just because his main source of damage is still his auto attacks, but his W is a skill shot, it's hard to land. His ult is a skill shot, it's hard to land. You can easily play around his reload timer by forcefully trying to go for a trade right as he finishes his fourth shot. Hell, you could even tank the fourth shot on purpose, because you know he's gonna reload after, just to get like 2 or 3 extra auto attacks in. And many times doing that in the early game is worth it, because they're gonna get more damage on him than he'll get on you. So against Jhin, play aggressive in the early game. In the late game, it's really hard to play against him, because he reaches the point where he can just kill you in like auto Q, or like 4th shot. That's it, and you're dead. Especially with the lethality build going around, but like I'm gonna try my best to not make this patch dependent. So yeah, Jhin, very skill shot reliant, very easy to deal with. Just make sure that you can finish off the game early, because if this game goes late, he can pretty easily start one-shotting you. It's somewhere between these two. I can't really tell which ones to put him in. I'll put him on top of easy matchup because it's not super easy. Yeah, I'll leave her here too, because I think this is something between skill and enemy favored. Xayah is somewhere between enemy favorite and skill as well, because Xayah is front loaded and late game, so she can unload all of her damage very quickly, but her W is a skill shot, which you can dodge, but her W hitbox is massive. It's hard to really see that coming. Her wave clear is really strong, so it's not always easy to get the push on her, but she doesn't have a lot of range. She isn't that mobile either. She doesn't have a dash technically. Her E gives her movement speed, and her ult, you need a target with plasma on them to do it, so your ult's a big threat against mostly mobile targets. Ashe said that about Jhin too, but Jhin has a lot more mobility on crits, so I didn't quite mention that. But against Xayah, it's a little bit harder to win in the early game, because she does have this tendency to win short trades, but in longer trades, especially if he's running Halo Blades, you can win the fight. Even if she procs her passive fully, you have lethal tempo, you're gonna easily out-trade her in a long trade. So just try to end the game fast, because the moment she reaches late game, she hyper scales. You can't deal with her. Jinx is probably close to favorite, because although her abilities are all skill shots and fairly easy to dodge, like it's not that hard to dodge a Jinx W, especially if you can see her casting it. If it's from the Fog of War, that's a bit harder, but Jinx's main damage source is still her auto attacks, and her auto attacks are very strongly amplified by her Q. So even in the early fights, because of her Q minigun attack speed, you can't always guarantee a win against that. So Jinx is a little bit more difficult, but thankfully she's immobile. You can make use of it with her ultimate. Your ultimate also, if she put traps down, your ults for an ally, when they shoot out, they'll trigger the trap, get rooted after knocking up the Jinx, and then that'll clear a path for you to go through and hit her. So her trap isn't the biggest deal to deal with either. Just remember to not let the game go on too long. Try to be a little aggressive, but don't extend trades too long because she has a lot more range with her Q and lethal tempo fully procced. You can't really trade against her. She's a similar situation to Ashe, but unlike Ashe, she doesn't have slows. So think of it like Ashe, but it's a ticking time bomb in the sense that if you go late game, you're going to lose. But against Ashe, if you go late game, it's not terrible. So she's a little bit harder to beat just because her damage is a little bit higher. You don't always know when to go in, but yeah, you can totally win the lane though. This is definitely Kalista favorite. Kog'maw is easily in the easier matchups part. He's completely immobile. His E does slow, but it's not a big deal. His Q is pretty much impossible to hit on you because it comes out pretty slow, to be honest. It's also not super useful on you. Its armor and MR shred is better on tanks. And his ultimate, it's also pretty hard to hit on you unless you're running away. In that case, you're pretty predictable of where you're going to walk. His W, just play around that. That's all you have to do. Just play around his W cooldown. The moment he presses W, don't fight. When his W is down, you fight. It's as easy as that. And as long as you can continue pressuring him while his W is down, you will win. Because if you keep spamming Ws, well, he won't have it when he actually needs it. If he's using W to farm because you're zoning them out. So just make sure Kog'Maw doesn't get the farm. And even in the late game, because Kog'Maw's damage is very max health based, you're not gonna die to him too quickly. The problem is he builds very tanky, so you can't kill him too quickly either. So try not to get the game late. That's the general rule for playing Kalista. Don't go late game. But Kog'Maw's really easy to beat. Lucian, normally I'd put him more on the higher side, but I think Lucian should be in skill matchup because of one main thing. Although he counters you in the sense that he's front loaded and early game, so his damage comes out quickly and he's strong early game, but you can dodge his Q, and that is a big deal. If you can jump his Q, especially if you have Halo Blades, this is very easy in the early game. If you can dodge his Q, he just lost like a third of his damage in his burst combo. And in that case, you do have a chance to kill him because his Q is a really important ability. It does a lot of damage. So yeah, dodge his Qs. That's really important. His ultimate isn't that hard to dodge either because he doesn't move any faster while using it unless he got marked by his W. And yeah, don't let the game go on too long because he will eventually have enough damage to kill you even without hitting his Q. So early game, it can be a bit hard to win against him early game because he's usually run with very aggressive enchanter supports like Nami or even Melio, or like engaged supports like Nautilus or Leona. So try not to get caught because that's how he snowballs. He's like a weaker version of Draven, but better late game because Draven falls off really quickly. So yeah, against Lucian, just don't take bad trades. Be very smart about it. Dodge his Qs. That's the main part. And you'll be good. Nilah's a bit scary because Nilah can dodge auto attacks. She doesn't have a lot of range, but she is pretty mobile. She's usually running Ghost, and she's pretty fast. She has a lot of damage. She's like Samira in that case, but unlike Samira, her ability to farm is pretty bad because she doesn't have a lot of range. So you can bully her out in the first few levels, but later on, it's very difficult to trade against her because the moment you do, she also goes in, and you have to. Okay, I shouldn't put her enemy favorite. I should put her in skill matchup. It's still a very easy matchup for Kalista, I would say. It might be in Kalista favorite actually, but she's kind of hard. The first few times you play against her, you'll be a little bit confused of what to do because it feels like she just wins every trade. But as long as you can space properly, like this is one of the only times where Kalista is spacing the enemies instead of spacing the ADC, I should say, instead of the other way around, because most ADCs outrange her. But Nilah has very little range, so space her properly and she's very easy to deal with. other than that, just don't fall for flat out one shots because you walked up like an idiot. So be careful of when you walk up to farm. Fight when her W is down. Her dash cooldowns are very, very long. So if she uses her dash for the next 20-ish seconds, that dash is going to be down. She has 2 charges, but the recharge time of each dash is very long. Misfortune. Completely unplayable. And it's not even because of this patch. Misfortune's kit is just very annoying to deal with. Her E slow is very strong. Her Q poke is kind of hard to deal with, but you can dodge the Q sometimes. The problem is her Q is an auto reset, her W is an attack speed steroid. She's very good in short trades, and especially with her ultimate, you can't fight back. In a team fight, she'll just kill you first when the enemy team engages on you. And it's hard to engage on her because she can build lethality, she can build Edge of Night very easily. And even if she goes crit, she can still build an Edge of Night. She's one of the only ADCs who can build both, just because I don't know why. You can probably do both on Caitlyn as well, but Misfortune is especially good with like half crit and then half lethality items, like go Collector, go, I don't know, Infinity Edge, and the Last Whisper item, and then you build like Youmu's and Edge of Night. So yeah, her build is really annoying to deal with because she builds full on one-shot burst damage. Her abilities are really annoying to deal with because she slows with her E, her Q comes out very quickly, her ult has a lot of range, so overall, try not to play against her. I would say she's even worse, a worse matchup than Draven, because Draven has a pretty high execution requirement, so you can probably find errors in how they play and then take advantage of that. Samira, definitely more on the enemy favorite side. I said Samira similar to Nilah, but Samira, unlike Nilah, can farm. She has an ability. Her Q is very good for farming, and she has 500 attack range, unlike Nilah. She can dash in more easily because if the enemy sees you, she has her passive dash to go on that, and then her E to go in, and then her E resets on kills. And she just has a lot more reliable front-loaded damage than Nilah. The thing about Nilah is she has some trouble getting in range because her E range isn't a lot. It's kind of bad. But Samira has her passive damage, passive dash, her E dash. Her W is straight up just a wind wall instead of just auto attack. So she can avoid CC, for example, very easily. So, yeah. If she goes in, it's very hard to get out, but unlike Nilah, where if Nilah goes in, you can get out fairly easily because you can space her out pretty quickly. So Samira, it's a bit harder. It's like a harder version of Nilah, the same way how like Ashe is an easier version of Jinx. Sorry, harder version of Jinx. Seraphine, the first non-ADC here. Seraphine is very skill shot heavy, so she is very easy to deal with. But she scales very easily because, she has a lot of range. She's a mage. Mages are great right now. And it's just hard to punish someone who's farming from like a full screen away. And she's usually run with other enchanters like Sona, Soraka, Taric, whatever. And that just makes the lane really hard to kill, and you're kind of forced to pay the executioner tax. So it's an annoying matchup, but it's very easy to win. It's just that even if you win the matchup, it probably doesn't matter because late game you might just lose because they just casually scale up with their really dirt cheap items. But other than that, she's pretty easy to deal with, I think. Sivir, also very easy to deal with, but I'd put her higher up than Kog'maw. Just because her poke's a little bit harder to deal with, her wave clear is very strong. But as long as you can play the mind game of making sure you E before or after her spell shields down, that mind game is very important to play. Or you can try and time it with your Q, or you can use your Q to bait the E out, the spell shield out. So it's really a matter of making sure your rend goes through and doesn't get blocked by spell shield. Other than that, she has low range, she's late game, her damage is backloaded so it takes a while to come out, and those are all great for Kalista. You can kill her very easily. Smolder is Kalista favorite because his W is very easy to dodge, his E is not that long, you can probably chase after him pretty easily. He doesn't go that much faster. His ultimate's pretty easy to dodge, and his early game is really weak. You can fight him even when you're down like 1,000 golds worth of item. You can probably fight him and win. But the problem is he scales, and he scales like crazy, and he will outscale you in 30 minutes. Even if you're like up 3 levels, up 100 farm, you'll probably still get out damaged and outscaled. So that's why I put it as Kalista favored and not easy matchup, because he can still do damage in the mid game because his Q is point and click. You can't dodge it, unlike something like Ezreal, which you can dodge. In that case, Jhin will also be kind of in Kalista favored, but I wasn't sure about that. Like, he could be here. I'll put him here for now because it is a little bit difficult. But yeah, Smolder and Jhin are similar, where like, don't let the game go on too long, but they're very easy to punish. Swain ADC, you don't see as much anymore, but I play a lot of Swain ADC. I've seen a lot of people play Swain ADC, and Swain is a little bit annoying just because he can build some really stupid items. Like, he can easily build a Frozen Heart, Rylai's, Zhonya's. They're all really bad for Kalista, and that's primarily why I put him in skill matchup. But him as a champion is very easy to deal with. His E is very easy to dodge. His Q, you can't quite dodge, it comes out very quickly, but because you're not going to be that close to him, not all of the bolts are going to hit you, and you'll dodge those. So his W, it's very simple to dodge. If you don't get hit by root, you won't get hit by W either. So even if the game goes on too long, even though he technically has infinite scaling, it's not a big deal. His passive health that he gets isn't a lot. So he's only skilled matchup because he can build some really frustrating items to deal with. But other than that, he's very easy. I might even put him at the start of Kalista favored. Like it's a borderline skill matchup. It's easy to win lane, but later on it can be hard to deal with his build. Twisted Fate ADC is coming up soon. It'll be very good soon, I think, unless they nerf it. But I am gonna rank it for now because I think it's pretty prevalent. I don't think they're gonna nerf Twisted Fate ADC too much because it's a fun playstyle and people are enjoying it. This is probably in the enemy favorite side because he has a point and click stun. It's plain and simple as that. He's point and click stun. He can output all of his damage very quickly in that stun duration, and then before you can even start moving, you can just get out. So yeah, that's why he kind of sucks. His ultimate gives vision of everyone, teleport to you, stun you, and everyone follows up on that. So it's not only is Twisted Fate like a good DPS, but it's also utility. He can stun the enemies, and then his team can clean up for him. So he's annoying in the same sense Caitlyn is annoying, I would say, where if you get caught by something, then you just lose all of your HP. But if you can catch him off guard, then he's kind of screwed, because if his abilities are down, like if Caitlyn E's down, you just get along in the easy trade. But if Twisted Fate's W is up, you can't quite do that. Tristana, unplayable. She has huge burst damage on her W, plus E combo. Q is a big attack speed steroid. Ult is a great way to make sure that you can get your E out on time, and then after the ult fully completes, you get blown up by the E bomb. She gets a lot of range as she levels up, and that's also really annoying to deal with because you get outranged very easily. She will outscale you. So Tristana, very difficult matchup. The only way to win against him is similar to Draven, where don't let her snowball. But it's a bit hard to prevent Tristana from snowballing because she can just farm, and her farming is very good. And she can easily get a pick on someone, even if she's kind of behind, because her W makes her very safe. She can go for fights which she shouldn't be able to go for and still get out. Twitch, more on the easy matchup side for sure, because his damage takes a long time to ramp up. His W slow is a bit annoying, but it's not a huge slow, especially if it's not AP. You're not going to play AP Twitch ADC, that's more of a support thing. So against Twitch ADC, just remember to buy control wards, remember to make sure you use your ult on Twitch, because he's immobile, and the moment he reveals himself, you should ult him immediately. Like, there's no question, even if it's a bait. If you can get Twitch out of the fight at the start, it's very good. Unless he's really behind. In that case, just ignore him until like 3 items. Yeah, Twitch, just don't let him scale up. You can easily prevent him from gaining farm. He can't probably prevent XP just because he can stay in range while invis, but you can make him really, really low on farm. His support, he'll probably be forced to roam, so make sure you're keeping track of when Twitch is in lane and when he's not in lane. Invis lasts for 10 to 15 seconds. If you don't see him for like 20-ish seconds, then he's probably out of lane. Ping your laner missing, so he doesn't get a random kill from mid or top. But overall, he's very easy to deal with. Just don't go late game. But he doesn't have a lot to deal with you. Varus. Varus is very skill shot reliant, but he's definitely a little bit harder to face. I might even put him in skill matchup, but I'll leave him here for now. Varus has mostly skill shot based damage, so you can dodge those. His E is a bit hard to dodge, but Q and ult you can definitely dodge if you see it coming. The problem is his damage comes out very quickly, and even if he misses his abilities, if he has his passive attack speed up, you may not always win the auto attack battle because he has more range than you. And if you get CC'd, even if he misses abilities, he can just keep auto attacking you without you being able to fight back. The game can go late game. Varus late game isn't a terrifying thing. It's strong. It's not weak or anything, but it's not as strong as some of the other ADCs listed here. So against Varus, you don't have to worry too much about winning the early game. You could play it passively, especially if it's lethality Varus. You kind of have to give up the lane. It's really hard to trade against that. But late game, you can deal with that very easily because he's immobile. You can chuck your support in and get a pick on him, or you can just ignore him, kind of, and go for team fights, because in a team fight, he can't do much if you can engage quick enough. If you let him poke you out in the neutral, then that sucks. So, against lethality, engage as aggressively as you can. Against on hit, he usually can't do the damage that easily because he has to walk up in auto attack range. He doesn't have that much going on otherwise. So in that case, you can just try and fight him before he gets his passive and lethal tempo fully stacked. After that, it's a bit hard to deal with. Vayne, definitely enemy favored because she has very good dueling. Her wave clear is really bad, so you can take advantage of that, but she's entirely single target dueling champion. Before, her Kalista's passive could miss invisible champions the moment like they go invis and her auto attack is coming out. That doesn't happen anymore, so that's why she isn't unplayable. She's definitely in the enemy favorite part now, because the Vayne lane isn't too bad, because you can probably win the early game, but mid to late game, it's really difficult. She will easily duel you. She can just side lane, and you can't match her because she'll just ult, and then it's really hard to match that. But in a team fight situation, she's gonna have a lot of trouble staying in the fight as long as you can see where she is and tell your team to attack them and ult your support into the Vayne. So it's really important that you kill Vayne near the start of the fight. Veigar. People don't really play a lot of Veigar ADC anymore, but if it's Veigar ADC, definitely on the easier end, but not that easy, because you can build Frozen Heart again. That sucks. He can build full on tank, but his early game is so incredibly weak that you can take a huge advantage early game. Like, you can be like 2,000, 3,000 gold up just from farming, just because Veigar can't do anything to contest you. But late game you will lose. So just remember that. Just don't let the game go on too long, because it's Veigar. It's pretty obvious. But other than that, you can play very aggressively, and that's fine. Yasuo, skill matchup, definitely, I'd say, because his wind wall's a bit annoying, but other than that, he is melee, and even if he's mobile, he can only dash towards minions, and if there's no minions that are pointing away from you, then he doesn't really have a way out, so you can kite him out pretty easily. Just play around wind wall properly. He can't wind wall your ultimate, even though it's kind of like a projectile. He's doing a champion, so you can't quite make a champion disappear into a wind wall. It's still gonna knock up, so remember that. And yeah, he does have a lot of burst damage if he can do like EQ ult and then Q immediately after. That's like half your HP gone immediately. So yeah, just don't get caught by a random ult knock up that comes out, and make sure to all in him before he can start doing a lot of damage, because he does require longer fights to be good. Kind of like Jinx, where after he gets a kill, she kind of just pops off. Or Yasuo, same deal. If the fight goes on long enough, his ultimate, Armor Pen, Lethal Tempo, Kraken Slayer, all of those get more and more amplified. Xayah is definitely on the easier side, because Xayah is, her E is very hard to hit on Kalista. You can kind of like jump circles around her, like literally just circle around her, and she can't use her E until you do a full circle and go back to where her E was initially. And by that time, you've had like 7-8 auto attacks on Xayah, and by then you could just kill her. So it's very easy to deal with her, but the problem is her ultimate, which makes her untargetable, puts a bunch of feathers all in front of you, and if she flashes, make sure her feathers fruit you, you're kind of dead. So her flash is the biggest deal. Make sure you don't try to force a fight on her if she has flash up and ultimate up, because she can probably very easily outplay you. Other than that, she's very easy to deal with. Her late game is strong, but her attack range is very low. And even in a long trade, as long as you can avoid the feathers, you are good. Karthus, easy matchup. Almost all the mage matchups are easy. The only reason I put Swain a little bit higher is because Swain does... It is a bit annoying because Swain builds some scary items, like Rylai's is really bad to deal with. But Karthus is very easy. Especially with some of the new MR items, like you can build a Canic Rukern and he just doesn't do damage to you. Same for like a Force of Nature or like a Adaptive Helm, not Adaptive Helm, what was it called? Jaksho. Yeah. So Karthus is a fully ability based, you can dodge all of his stuff. Only way you'll lose is if he can just kill you with his E and a random Q that hits you here or there. But you should be able to win against him very easily. Just dodge his Qs. It's very important that you don't kite mindlessly. You have to put a lot of effort into being random in your kiting, so he can't predict where you're gonna go. But as long as you can kite randomly, make sure he can't like just kill you by hitting random Qs, you're good. Senna. I don't see a lot of Senna ADCs nowadays, but this is Senna ADC, not support, by the way. Senna ADC is probably more on the Kalista favorite side, but it's not an easy matchup because she can outrange you. Her Q is slow, she gets movement speed from her passive from auto attacking you. Her W is very hard to hit, so it's fine, but her E makes her in camouflage, so you can't auto attack her, so you can't close the distance against her. And that really sucks. If her E didn't exist, Senna would be the easiest ADC to deal with. Like, she would be here if her E didn't exist. But her E, just because of that, you can't extend trades out very easily. And she easily outscales you. Like, she'll have... By the time she reaches 100 stacks, you've already lost the game because she now has so much range that you just can't deal with her. So don't let the game go on too long. Be very aggressive. Make sure you take her E down before you go for an extended trade to go for the kill. Zeri. Right now, Zeri is absolutely terrible. But I'm going to try my best to make this tier list not patch dependent. If Zeri and Kalista were like evenly good, I would say Zeri is more on the Kalista favorite side because she is very much a champion that prefers to fight over a very long fight, and she's very late game. But in the late game, Zeri has a tendency to just straight up one shot you with like W, EW, and then you alt passive auto Q, and that along with like a charged item like Storm Razor or something, that kills Kalista after like 3+ items. But she should never reach that point. The problem is it's hard to punish Zeri when her E just gets her out. But now that with the new map, the walls are a little bit further away, you could maybe deal with her a bit more easily. But overall, right now, she's easy to deal with. But if she is a little bit stronger, like especially after the next patch, then you should try to play a bit more aggressively to make sure she doesn't get to scale. So that should conclude the tier list. I don't think there's any other ADC I should mention here. I didn't pick Kalista because you're not going to have a Kalista versus Kalista matchup in ranked. Plus, it's Kalista. It's obviously going to be a skill matchup. It's the same champion. So the TLDR of it is never pick Kalista into these champions. Like, it's very difficult to win against these. And always always have a very, very bad time laning against these champions. These ones are a little way harder to deal with than you'd expect. Like, so these champions will outscale you and win lane, and it's not easy to deal with. These ones are just very much just from experience. You have to know when you can go in and when you can't. These ones, similar to a skill matchup, but it's a little bit more lenient in terms of the window of when you can go in. So like, when Varus passive is down, you go in. When Swain doesn't have ult, you go in. It's a bit easier. While for like this group, you don't always know when you can go in or not. And these champions, you literally just fight them and you'll just win. They don't have the damage to deal with you. They can't hit stuff to deal with you. As you can see, they're all like late game champions who do damage over very long fights, while these are all champions who do damage very quickly and are usually stronger in the early game than late game. Except Vayne here. Vayne's like the only exception that like is just super strong late game and early game for dueling. But yeah, I hope this video was helpful. If you guys want a support tier list, or like I talk about what supports are good with Kalista and what supports are good against Kalista and all that stuff, that would be a much, much longer video. But if you want that, I might do it. Maybe. I don't know. But that's the tier list. You can discuss about the positions here. If you play any of these champions against Kalista and you think they should be placed somewhere else, let me know. I'll let you know what I think. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. By the way, I may not upload for a little while because I have a bunch of tests coming up, but I'll try to find some stuff to upload soon. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you later. Bye.